I would like to thank you again for joining us today for the 5th edition of the Business for Peace annual event that is taking place in Cairo, Egypt. And thank you all for coming, knowing that the event will continue until tomorrow, and we hope to see you tomorrow as well. Now we're gonna continue with our program. I know we are running a little bit late, so we're going to head directly to the next session. For the workshop findings, we will document all the recommendations and we will send them to you. Now we're going to, during the next session, the panel discussion that is entitled Promoting Entrepreneurship to Sustain Peace, we're going to explore some examples of how business can have an impact through investments in education, social entrepreneurship, and employment of young people. Now, the moderator of this session is known, according to her colleagues, as the goddess of the International Labor Office in Egypt. So please help me welcome Ms. Amal Mowafy, the Chief Technical Advisor at the International Labor Office. Please. I would like to call all the speakers that will be joining this panel. Mr. Yannick Pont, the Director of Spark. Mr. Abdelrahman Ayman, Global President of AIESEC International and Youth Advocate. Ms. Wiam Ali, Adolescent Development Officer at the United Nations Children's Fund in Egypt. Ms. Yasmin Al-Hagri, the Deputy Executive Director at Wataniya Society.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you enjoyed your lunch, and I hope the organizers have some coffee in place so that we can continue with our sessions. It has been a long day, but I promise you that this is going to be a very exciting session. It's a great privilege and a real honor to be here today among this distinguished group of audiences, and I really thank the UN Global Compact for this opportunity, and further also being with this very distinguished panel that represents various organizations. We have private sector with Mr. Yannick Pont from Spark. We have UN UNICEF with WM Ilesi, and we have NGO presence from Yasmin, and we have also youth. And we have Abdelrahman with us, representing himself. I was asking him, I was looking at your bio, and you're wearing many hats, so how am I going to present you? And he said, me. So we're very happy to have this distinguished panel with us. And when I was looking at the agenda and in preparation for this session, it struck me that the intro was on a statistic that was given by the International Labor Organization in 2014, where it alluded to unemployment among youth, and it spoke about 74 million young people out of jobs. Building on the same storyline, and taking it from the quote from the ILO statistic, I would like to move it to a sort of a higher level or a bigger order, if you wish, and let us look at how many people live in countries where they experience violence, fragile situations, and conflicts. Do we have a handle on that? We're talking about 2 billion people. Of these, 400 million people are between the age of 15 and 29. So we're talking about 25% of those 2 billion being young people. And this, of course, leads in a way or another to poverty. But this is one side of the coin. There's another side to the coin. When we look at unemployment and decent work deficits. These are also triggers and can be strong triggers for fragility and vulnerability. So it's like a cause and effect, which leads to the other. So we really need to look at the root causes of vulnerability, fragility, violence, and poverty. We need to address those root causes. We need to look at the economic, social, and environmental aspects. Climate change and the natural disasters that are coming with it also threaten peace. So we need to look at it from a holistic perspective, from an economic, social, and the environmental level. As Sana was introducing this panel, the panel will focus on how businesses can transform and have impact through education, social entrepreneurship, employment of young people. And, coming from an international organization that looks for social justice, we see from our perspective, in order to have peace, we need to cultivate social justice. In order to have peace, we need decent work, not any work. We need work that alleviates people out of poverty. And I think with this distinguished panel, we can come to some examples, some good practical examples that have been put in place. And this is going to be a two-way panel. So the audiences will be, the speakers will be giving their TED Talks. And I hope that they inspire you and we can have a fruitful dialogue together, because I'm not going to be addressing the same people. I'd like to address another group of people as well. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Yannick Dupont, the CEO of an international NGO, Spark, headquartered in Amsterdam. But actually we're a local NGO, I always joke, because we're working in 15 fragile states. We have local registrations and we work extremely close with the governments where we work. And I'll explain during a case, I will present why, and why this is important for Business for Peace. We're about 150 people working for us, only 10 international, 140 from the countries we work in, mostly 90% right now in the MENA region. And we focus on SME development, so training, coaching, access to finance for startups and existing companies. On one hand, on the other hand, we focus on higher education and higher vocational education. For example, at the moment we have about 10,000 scholarships for Syrian refugees and host communities in Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey, and Iraq. So we have a large wing on higher education, we have a large wing on business development. We're non-profit, although we are a member of the Dutch Business Council, the only NGO that was admitted on special condition, because we work a lot with business, and we see business really as a tool to create stability and to create prosperity in post-conflict environments. We only focus on economic development, because when we started, we focused, let's say, on a more peace-building work 25 years ago when we started, and we found that just going through peace dialogue didn't yield any results in very polarized political environments. So we realized it's much better to focus on real socioeconomic needs, and through that try to bring communities together. On one case I will briefly present and try to draw some lessons learned from. It's not from the region. I took it on purpose from another area we worked in for a long time, from Kosovo, former Yugoslavia. And I'll try to address some of the points that were made this morning, lessons that also Serge and others were actually making. Well, imagine the following. You have this new country, Kosovo, with a central government that doesn't control 10% of its territory because there is another ethnic group there. A lot of attacks, a lot of violence, a very typical country, I would say, that many of us are dealing with, where you have violence, ethnic violence, and economic problems coming together. 40% youth unemployment, a big fuel. It's like even armies for these conflicting groups. A frozen conflict there, where it's almost impossible to have normal communication between the sides. But actually there is not business for peace at the moment. When we started, there was business for war. And I think that's very good to realize that in conflict areas, business is doing an amazing job. Selling drugs, weapons, women, I mean, also sometimes normal food staples and stuff. But if you look at conflict areas and you go deep, the economy of war, the economy of conflict is just amazing, and it just cuts through all political and ethnic lines. But of course, this is not the desired long-term sustainable economic activity. I think everybody would agree, because this would undermine the democracy of a state and state legitimacy. So I think the trick, and I think Serge was also hinting at that, is not just to promote economic activity per se, not just to create jobs, not just to hit the indicators, but what is it for? And are you really having an impact on the stability and on the peace in such a region? So we started a large program there, and we made, with the UN together, we made a huge mistake at the beginning. We had to stop the whole program. Two problems. One, we didn't involve the central government enough, so they were very wary. What is that NGO doing in that community that we don't have access to? So they were wary and they slowed it down. Second problem, we put people in the steering committee that actually turned out to be connected to organized crime and weapon dealers. So we didn't do lesson number one, I think Serge also hinted at it, due diligence. Make sure that you know who you're dealing with, make sure that the actors you're engaging with are legitimate economic actors and proper political actors. Because you can make things worse. If you finance these people, they will fuel the money to undesired activity. So then the second problem was with the government. So it took us 4 years at the end to convince the central government, who had a hard approach on what they saw as a separatists, as terrorists. So they had a hard military police approach. But they came to us at some point after 4 years saying, it's not really working, you know. Yes, we can arrest people, we can bomb stuff, we can hit and hit and hit, but the problem goes underground. So at the end, some more strategic thinkers from central government actually approached several NGOs and said, could you help bring some economic development, jobs, social work, so we can stabilize that area? So then together with UN, we redesigned the program, and we started with job creation. And that worked very well. So we had a lot of jobs created, but still it was divided. So it was one community here, one community there. They were not trading together. So then we had to do the final step, and it was the most difficult step. And that was actually initiated by the government and this other community that was not yet under full control, that they came to us and UN and other NGOs and said, hey, we see that this actually makes sense. We need to normalize relations, we need to integrate better with central government, but then we want some rights in return. And then these channels of these programs actually did what the smart people in the central government had actually as a vision. They start serving as a bridge. So business leaders started talking to their politicians. There was all these like international conferences on economic development where they would also meet and cut deals. And at the end it led to one of the 3 peace agreements that the EU brokered between Serbia and Kosovo on labor mobility. So then us together with several other actors, we helped design a peace agreement where community members could now get their diplomas recognized, working companies across the divide, leading to people from a first, let's say, marginalized community to be much better represented in jobs in central government, which gave the government also better control over the territory, but also gave the government a better understanding what the socioeconomic needs were of that community. And all this actually, and I will now have to wrap it up, I think was fueled by business. It was fueled, like the core of this was actually business leaders from that community who understood that if they want to trade better, if they want more jobs for their community, they need to convince their political leadership that it's not just about trading and exporting and jobs, but also you need to tackle this dialogue and you need to use the economic agenda to also bring communities together. So from this context, what we have taken also into other contexts, I think, is you have to be very careful that you just don't go in and think that it's business as usual and just create jobs. You're working in highly sensitive environments, which means you need to do your due diligence. You need to work really and get trust from a central government because you need to work with them in that very sensitive peace process and stabilization process. Make the government your partner and convince that it needs a more complex approach to lead to long-term stability. And connect, and this is something that we see very often is where our programs have not gotten the maximum impact, connect your operational activities to the macro, political, and economic context. Very often we are working on the ground, but not connected to developments on a more macro level. And finally, I would end here take time. So the process I just described, from first initiation of activities until at the end this peace deal, that was 10 years. And not just 10 years of steady work, it was 10 years of a lot of trouble, a lot of pushback, a lot of problems. So I think we should also move away from short cycle, 2-3 year projects, but actually think long term. Thank you.
Thank you, Yannick, very much for this short brief, and I think we will be elaborating on that later. And now, Elisi from UNICEF will be giving her TED Talk, if you wish. So, the floor is yours.
First of all, it gives me great pleasure to be among the distinguished speakers and esteemed audience as well. My presentation is going to be focusing on the Egyptian context, more specifically a project that's being implemented between UNICEF in collaboration with the Ministry of Youth and Sports, namely Mishwari, or My Journey in English. But first of all, let me give you sort of like a quick background on young people in Egypt and the challenges they face, and most importantly, the challenge of unemployment. Young people represent around 1/3 of the total population of Egypt, which is around 30 million. And actually, they face many problems, including the job market and the unemployment. 90% of those who are unemployed in Egypt are youth below the age of 30. 2/3 of them are young people looking for a job for more than 1 year. Unemployment rates for females 20 to 24 is higher than males. In the age bracket 15 to 29 years old, the overall rate of youth need, which is not in education, not in training, or in employment, which is basically that those young people are completely disengaged and disconnected from the Egyptian society, and this percentage is 33% from the Egyptian young people 15 to 29. For the employed youth, informality is widespread, which brings job insecurity and weak insurance for young people. The percent of employers or self-employed young people has increased from 2009 to 2014 from 3.7% to 13.1% among young employed men and 3.2% to 5.7% among employed women. 17% of young people, according to the survey of young people, aspire to migrate within the coming 5 years. And those were the main challenges. And actually, I wanted to present the intervention that UNICEF has done in collaboration with the Ministry of Youth and Sports. And it's basically a project that was introduced in 2008, namely Mishwari, or My Journey. The last or the third phase of Mishwari started in 2017 with special focus on some emerging issues such as irregular migration, in governorates where there are trends of irregular migrants, and also with focus on some harmful practices in governorates where there are prevalence of harmful practices such as FGM and child marriage. The project has two main components, the first of which is a skills development component, which include life employability and entrepreneurial skills, and the second component is the career guidance component, which is basically around knowledge on career development, career prospects, and planning through career support services, including one-to-one career guidance, development workshops, participatory follow-up sessions, and general sessions on CV writing and interview skills. Among the results of the project, as you can see from the presentation, the first and the most important of which is the ownership of the government. The project has been adopted by the Ministry of Youth and Sports since 2015-2016, and this was stipulated in one of the protocols of collaboration between UNICEF and the Ministry of Youth and Sports. And now the ministry is considering it as one of its national programs. Capacitating staff affiliated to the ministry, and this was the methodology of the project to ensure the sustainability beyond UNICEF support, that we train staff affiliated to the ministry. Around 270 staff affiliated to the ministry in the targeted governorates were trained to be trainers and facilitators to provide the career guidance package and the skills development package. The outreach to the most marginalized areas, more than 165 youth centers in 11 governorates are actually implementing Mishwari. And actually the selection of the youth center was based on a study done by CapMass on the most impoverished area in Egypt. Creating the demand, and actually now many youth directorates are requesting the Ministry of Youth and Sports to expand the geographical scope of Mishwari and implement them beyond the 11 targeted governorate as a national program. Reaching to thousands of young people, and actually we've, through Mishwari, we have reached around 75,000 young people through the skills development component, and through the career guidance component, we reached around 35,000 young people in the 11 targeted governorates. Creating a new model that provides career guidance, and this is actually a physical space available in youth centers in the targeted governorates, where young people can go and seek guidance and support in relation to their career path and career development. One of the most important actually results is basically to leverage from the private sector. And you have seen some examples in the presentation of young people who have been linked up with the on-the-job training opportunities in different hotels such as Meridian, Hilton, and also in Aramex and other international private sector entities such as Aramex and Carrefour. And you have seen this in the presentation that was running a while ago. Capacitating young people to start their own businesses, and you've seen some young people and some success stories from the project of young people from Upper Egypt who have started their own businesses, and this is part of the social and economic empowerment of young people. In the end, it's basically that I want to shed light on the enablers. There are so many enablers within the Egyptian context for the time being, one of which be it the Youth Forum that started in 2017 and just ended, the 2018 one just ended yesterday. And this actually sheds light on the youth development agenda, which is put high on the political agenda. And the forum brings together young people from around the globe, and it's basically around creating platforms for youth engagement and also for social cohesion. Egypt's Vision 2030, which puts emphasis on boosting sustainable economic growth through decent job creation and generating adequate and productive job opportunities with special focus on women and youth. Finally, it is essential to recognize the government ownership and adoption of the program, which is basically trying to bring about real change on the ground in the lives of young people of Egypt. It is evident that the momentum is there, and it is evident that there is a need for a collaborative effort between UN, government, private sector, and other entities to support the development of young people. Thank you.
Thank you. So I ask Abdelrahman to take the floor.
Okay, so as a young person, it was not about really what is the title that I would like to put behind my name, because what I would like to focus a lot more on is what I'm here to talk about today. So I'm going to try to keep it as youthful as possible. So we're going to start with an exercise, because that's usually what we do as young people. So I'm just going to ask you simple questions, and if you agree or if you think this applies to you, I would like you to raise your hand. Is that simple? Okay? My first question. If you have access to clean water and sanitation, please raise your hand. If you have access to clean water, very good. I think you're getting the exercise very simply. If you have, I know relatively clean water, it can be also within that dimension. If you have access to healthcare in any sort or form, please raise your hand. If you sleep under a roof and feel safe most of the time, please raise your hand. If you had access to education beyond primary, secondary, and tertiary, please raise your hand, meaning you finished university. Very good. And my last one. If you would have what we would consider a decent job, please raise your hand. Which brings me to my narrative. Now I want you to take a moment while you're sitting in our very comfortable seats in this fantastic room. And I want you to imagine what would happen if you woke up tomorrow, you walked into the bathroom, you want to take a shower, your morning shower, you went to turn on the water tap, and nothing came out. So you went to the sink in the kitchen, you tried to turn it on, nothing came out of it. You went to turn on the electricity, and it didn't turn on. You tried to take the phone to call someone to come and help out, and you couldn't, because you don't even have a phone. You went out to try and ask for help, maybe from your neighbors, and you found them in the exact same situation. How would that feel like? So you walked for 2 kilometers, an uphill walk, extremely exhausted, to get to a shop where you would know would have someone that can help you fix this situation. You put your hand in your pocket, and you don't even have $1. In this form, almost 18 Egyptian pounds. You don't even have that. How would that feel like? I'll give you a moment to sink it in. Unfortunately, that is the reality of a very big portion of the world's population. It's not just an imagination. But what we try to do collectively as humankind is to come together and put our collective intelligence into trying to create a plan for that. We're like, okay, let's try and be ambitious. I know a lot of people sometimes look at the Sustainable Development Goals and they're like, oh my God, this is so ambitious. It's so complex. Our problems are so complex. And I understand that. But in a world where that story and narrative that I just told you is still a possible reality, shouldn't we be ambitious? Shouldn't we feel keen to be able to try and create a little bit more, maybe stretch ourselves, because we do have the resources. If we look at a world where we waste more than we use, what does that mean? It means abundance. It means that the resources are available only if we use them properly. I'm not going to claim that I'm an expert in sustainable development, not even in the beginning of the path. So, just like a very big portion of a young people's population, we went out there, let's say with a group of friends, and we tried to ask young people, we're like, do you know what is sustainable development? Are you aware of it? And more than 55% of the young people that we surveyed 160,000 young people from more than 120 countries. 55% of them said, we don't even know that exists, that this agenda exists, that the world tried to come together and create a plan. And from my perspective, that's a little bit of a problem. So we told them, okay, if you saw all of those issues, what from your perspective is the biggest issue we're facing as a generation? And most of them said quality of education. And I think it's very connected to my previous point. Because if they don't even know they exist, what are the type of educational systems that we're putting in place that are trying to pivot young people and put them on the beginning of a journey to be able to create a sustainable future if they don't even know that that plan exists? What are the type of educational institutions we should have in place that can make that a reality, make it a possibility? But that's okay. Because most of the time we say, young people are the future. And that's a picture of me with some of those young people that believe that they're a future and we're all super excited. Usually we look like that most of the time, very enthusiastic, especially when taking photos, especially if it's a selfie. We're that type of generation. And that's fine. But my counterintuitive point here is that I would argue that we are the future. And here's what we would usually say as a small call to action. If we are the last generation that can end or reverse climate change and end extreme poverty, then we're not the future. Then we are the now. Then we need to take action now in accordance with that. And when a very, very simple perspective put in place is that usually that narrative or that notion of young people are the future already categorizes young people in a certain specific place, which is, then we're gonna give them opportunities tomorrow. Then we're gonna invest in them tomorrow, or we're gonna invest in them for tomorrow. While actually, if you come to think about it, if you're capable of using that fuel, investing in young people today, giving them opportunities to change the world, they actually have every single possible tool to make it happen. Because they can change the world. Because they do have those types of innovative frameworks. Because if you come to think about it, they were the same people that created things like this and started talking about social innovation, started talking about entrepreneurship, but from a different perspective. How can it be with a social purpose? How can we look at a community need and look at a possible business outcome that would generate revenue and profit, but in the same time, make sure that at the center of that is where my business lies, which is what we call now social entrepreneurship. It's becoming a term, a buzzword that's being used left and right and center, but it was created by this generation. So why not bank on that? Why not try to bank on young people in that perspective? Because they're capable of also building frameworks like that. Half of the things that are on that slide, maybe I don't even understand. But we usually or probably do them in the day-to-day just due to nature, just due to need that exists around us. So from my perspective, last but not least, if we want to imagine a world where there's no poverty and zero hunger, we have good health and well-being, quality education, and full gender equality everywhere. There's clean water and sanitation for everyone. Affordable and clean energy has helped to create decent work and economic growth. Our prosperity is fueled by investment in industry, innovation, and infrastructure. And that has helped us to reduce inequalities. We live in sustainable cities and communities, and responsible consumption and production is healing our planet, finally. Climate change has capped the warming of the planet, and we have flourishing life below water and abundant, diverse life on land. We enjoy peace and justice through strong institutions and have built long-term partnerships for the goals. If you want that to happen, it's time to bank on young people. And it's up to young people to do something about it from that point in time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now we have our final TED Talk. We have Yasmin Al-Hagri.
Thank you, Abdelrahman, and thank you for paving the way for my exercise, because I have exercise as well. Okay, forget about the presentation. I would like you to leave your mobile phone for just half a minute, 30 seconds. And remember, thank you. And remember how it used to be like when you were at the age 18. So, what are the pictures that you started to recall? Were they the first day you entered university? Was it the time you received your high school certificate? Or maybe the first student activity you joined? Or maybe your first boyfriend or first girlfriend? Beautiful memories, isn't it? But the fact is, it's not the case. It's not the same feeling for all of you. Today I'm going to talk about the future, different kind of youth, the orphanage youth raised in institutional homes in orphanages. Finally, orphan youth or children raised in institutional homes, they must leave their homes at age 18. In Egypt, it's only for male, but in some countries, it's for both gender, where they have to leave their orphanage by 18. When I say they have to leave by by 18, it means they have to live on their own. Which means they need a shelter, they need income to find a shelter, they need a decent job, and they need to have a good education to have a decent job. So, the question was, how can we help all of you to be independent and to pass this transition period from 18 to 21 to be able to count on themselves and to be able to be productive citizens in the community? In 2011, what the Ministry for the Development of Orphanages decided that we have to start working with orphanages. So, first thing that crossed our mind was we must search for organizations that are working already with youth and ask them to include orphan youth in their programs. Because we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. So when we asked them to include the orphan youth, they told us, sorry, we are working with youth, but we do not work with orphans. That was awkward. So we said, okay, we are going to do the program ourselves. So we started to address orphanage managers and founders to communicate with them and to start introducing the program, asking them to send their youth before the age of 18 to start taking our program. And the first question was, are you going to secure them jobs? And our answer was, no, we are not 100% that we can secure them jobs, but we are 100% positive that we are going to give them the tools and the skills required to have a decent job. So we started to think maybe it's a good idea to partner with the private sector and to find some internship opportunities and some job opportunities after the program ends, after the 1 year program. So when we started to address corporate social responsibility, they got really excited and they told us, yes, we have lots of vacancies. We need messengers, office boys, drivers, and aidmen for security. And with all due respect to all professions and all jobs, but we had a question, are these only the vacancies you have in your company? And the answer was no, but you are talking about orphan youth. These are the jobs that are suitable for the orphan youth. Is it? So we decided we need to talk to the orphan youth themselves to know what exactly they need. And we realized that we have lots of work and time and effort that we need to spend with them to build trust, not only between us, but to help them to trust themselves. We realized that orphan youth, all what they need is their inner peace, to be able to find a job, to continue their education, to live independently. I'm not going to talk about the program which is called Fursa, Opportunity, and which started in 2011. And I cannot today talk about the 140 youth we enjoyed and we learned from them so much in the past years. I just selected one example to share with you to understand what I'm talking about. But when we met back, he was 18 years old. But was very frustrated because his one dream was to be an actor, but he couldn't make it because when he applied for the High Cinema Institute, he wasn't accepted. At that time, he found that it's ended. So when he joined Fursa and he got introduced to different kinds of fields or jobs, and he took a workshop in videography and photography, that there are alternatives for his dream. And maybe he should try something new instead of just being frustrated. So Beth enjoyed photography. He actually asked the instructor to be his assistant for free because he just wanted to learn. And then after a few years, Beth became a freelancer as a videographer and photographer who actually gives right now workshop in photography and videography for the new participants in Fursa. We're very glad that we are contracting with them to do our own documentaries, and other companies also is working with him, and they are very happy with his work. But there was another frustration that we had, which is the way how people perceive orphan youth. This was something that really bothers me. So we started in order to complain, to have an active role, and we started to join an awareness campaign together with us, telling people and communicating with people more to tell them and to raise their awareness who are the orphans, and they are capable and they can do something. And that started also to talk to his peers, and now he is one of our youth forum members at Moderator, because we invited all the alumni of the program to join the forum, to take another role, to be change agents, and to inspire their peers. So that he believes that it's all about your work. It's not about how you were raised or who were your parents, even if they were unknown. This is not the issue. The issue is your work, your passion, your dream. And this is what God has for. I have another story, but I'm not going because the time is passing. So all I want to say is, after 7 years working with youth, we realized that the program is not enough. We need to scale up, and we need to institutionalize this expertise nationwide. And that's why we decided that next year we're going to launch a 5-year project supporting and developing the ecosystem for the caregivers, actually the orphan youth. And simply this is our story. Thank you.
I actually thank all 4 members of the panel for very interesting interventions. And I believe we could open it up to the floor for a round of questions, comments if you wish, but I'd be very much obliged if you sort of say who you are, for which organization do you represent, and if you have a particular comment or a question, whom are you addressing it to. We will take a round of like 3 questions, and then if there's more interest, we will engage further. So any comments or questions to the panelists? None? Because I have a number of burning questions over here, so. I can't, okay. Yes, sure. Seems I can't see that far.
Thank you very much for your presentations. My name is Juan Fuentes. I am from Spain. I represent here the Spanish Football League. And you raised some interesting points regarding the SDGs and how to implement it in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. But what I believe is that I have a lot of entrepreneurs friends. They don't know actually what are the SDGs. And one of my points, and it's something that I believe, is you ask people here, we all know what the SDGs are, okay? And we don't know how to implement them, and we don't know how to proceed through them. But you ask to the normal people, to the entrepreneurs, to the civil society, I believe 90% of the people, if not more, they don't really know what is this about. So my question is how to communicate to the people, to the entrepreneurs, to the civil society, what is this about? Because I believe if the civil society, they don't take part of it, then this is going nowhere. I mean, it's of course very good to have, like hundreds of companies supporting and so forth, but I believe it has to be SDGs, an individual approach and an individual implementation. And I believe this does not exist anymore. I don't know, in my case, working in the Spanish Football League, it's something we do now to create more awareness about football is using influencers and celebrities. We take them to the stadiums, and everybody knows more about us because of that. So I don't know, it has to be another approach to tell the people, to tell the entrepreneurs, to tell the civil society, those are the SDGs. I don't believe that right now, 2 years after they were implemented, people really know what is this about, and in 12 years, this has to be done, supposedly. So I want to ask you, what is your approach in order to tell the society, to tell the entrepreneurs, guys, this is the SDGs, and we all have to work on that, otherwise we are not going anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions before I turn it to the colleagues on the panel? Yes, please.
Can
because of the, I think there's translation, right?
My name is Kees Hulsman, Center for Intercultural Dialogue and Translation. AIESEC, we are taking dozens of interns from AIESEC into our organization and provide them with internships. But I'm sure there are plenty others here in the hall who could probably also take in internships. So what is your criteria for intern placements? Can you explain that?
Okay, I'll turn it to the panel, and if there's another round of questions, we will come back to that. Okay, so Abdelrahman, maybe you can start.
Yeah, I'll comment first on the first question. Thank you so much for your question. It's, I think it's very valuable, and it touches on a point that I was mentioning in the beginning, which is that when we actually surveyed young people, more than 55% of them don't even know what the Sustainable Development Goals are. I think it's, so imagine something being created at the top of a tower. So imagine the highest tower in the world, like Burj Khalifa, and on the top, like topmost floor, there's a group of 4 people that are having a discussion. They have a discussion and they reach a conclusion. And they're expecting the people that are on the first floor to be able to take that forward on the grassroots. By the time that that message comes down, it takes a little bit of time. And if the channels that bring, or the elevators, if they're not working well, the message might not even reach there. So I think from my perspective, the SDGs were created at a very high level, like at the topmost level, or like during a high-level political forum, adopted by member states through their representatives. The key now is if you want to start mobilizing grassroots movements, it needs to be through the channels that these grassroots movements are using for communication. So I think it's first about a communication point, utilizing Web 2.0, social media channels, and things that are more progressive and contemporary in putting the message out there. That's the first thing. Second thing is, when it comes to social entrepreneurship or an entrepreneur is looking at value creation, right? I want to create a prosperous or profitable business, maybe someday, because now some businesses are not profitable, and someday they will reach profitability, hopefully. But if I don't see the core value, the return on the investment of putting this social purpose at the core of what I do, then you're asking me to do philanthropy. And a social entrepreneur is not a philanthropist. A social entrepreneur is a person that looks at generating economic revenue, but in the same time, centering it around the social cause or social purpose in the community. So I think it's about putting the terminology in the proper way and making entrepreneurs understand that putting a social purpose at core would be able to yield or generate a certain possible economic value also. I think these would be 2 key points. So communication and mutual value creation. For the second question, for the criteria that we have for screening the interns, we try to diversify our opportunity portfolio. So we have civil society, companies, corporates, some NGOs. So we have a very diverse portfolio of opportunities that we offer to young people, as much as possible so we can be inclusive. Initially, what you would think is that, yes, we would take young people that speak English or that have higher education, etc. That was the initial approach towards it, because AIESEC has been there for almost 70 years. But what we're trying to do currently, at the turn of, since 2015, is to diversify our opportunity portfolio in a way that would suit diverse populations of young people, and also looking at corporate partners or NGO partners or civil society partners that are willing to sponsor or give interns a scholarship to be able to go abroad on an exchange experience for different opportunities. But I would say that the key now, cutoff, is their values, how their value system looks like, and are they willing to engage in a leadership development experience or not? I would say that's the cutoff.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Yeah, sure.
Hi, I'm Lamer from the UN Global Compact. I have a question for you, Yannick. There was a study that shared that entrepreneurship amongst youth that are refugees in Western countries and Europe in particular did not seem to be a good method. Like, it was just not effective, it was not working. It was almost like this myth that we're throwing out there in Europe, go be an entrepreneur. However, I guess your experiences in other parts of the world show that entrepreneurship does work. So I'm kind of curious, with the same type of population, why do you think there's such a discrepancy in achieving the goal of promoting entrepreneurship amongst youth, and particularly refugees, in these two different settings?
Yeah, thanks. So if I get the question right, like, is it really working with entrepreneurship for refugees in Europe? Well, it's not easy. I think one thing about entrepreneurship is that not everybody is an entrepreneur. And it sounds maybe strange when I say that, you know, it's like an open door, but sometimes in these days I get the feeling, and as an entrepreneurial NGO, we're very happy with this attention for entrepreneurship. But only 5 to 10%, I think, of a population has the real ability to start or wants to have an own company. You know, this is not a lot of people just want to be a good employee or be a scientist or be, you know, entrepreneur is one choice. Now, I think why it works better in some difficult contexts, like for example, in the example I gave in Kosovo, we had just amazing startups with youth. It was just amazing. We had 99% repayment rate of loans in the part of Kosovo that I described on the program. Well, people paying back their loans, this is so high. In Holland, you have many more companies failing or, you know, than that. And I think that's entrepreneurship by necessity to some extent, that these youth didn't have an opportunity to be hired in government or have a normal job. So I think under very harsh conditions, entrepreneurship is sometimes a survival mechanism and therefore more desired or more prevalent. In Europe, actually we are running a program with Generali, the largest European insurance firm. We designed their refugee startup program of the human safety net. And there in France and Germany, Italy, soon Turkey, probably other countries, we're starting with Generali offices to offer refugees training, coaching, access to finance to start up or grow their company. And I must say that indeed, the record is kind of mixed. So it is very difficult to find very good applications. There is a lot of dropouts. You know, not everybody makes it till the end. So yes, so I agree with you that it seems to be harder in Europe. I think also because there is more tape, there is more bureaucracy, but also there is more other opportunities for refugees coming than just being an entrepreneur, than if you sit in a post-conflict environment with 40% youth unemployment, etc. Yeah, that would be my answer.
Any other questions, comments? Yeah, we have one there in the middle.
Hello. Yes, my name is Mango Denks, representative of refugees, South Sudanese refugees in Egypt. My question is that because the use of the refugees all around the world for inside the Cairo here are now...
Excuse me, I think we are all having a problem here, hearing there's an echo. There's a strong echo, so we are not hearing very well, so...
Yeah, my question is that the refugees use children now are getting in dangers. Because why? Because they lose hope. They are losing hope in a life. So we are talking about how we can cultivate peace inside the human being and inside everybody. So the youth, refugees youth, they are almost, sometimes they study, they approach university, but they fail because lack of the needs. Because they don't have needs. That's why when they lose hope, they try to use drug. How can we stop that on drugging and joining a guns group and fighting, kidnap people, making a group to survive? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, definitely. Did that work? Yeah. So definitely the issue that you're referring to is very important within the Egyptian context, where Egypt is receiving young people from different parts of the world, or from Africa in specific, coming from the south, heading to the north, taking Egypt as a transit or actually as a destination as well. It's a very huge problem, and actually UNICEF is tapping into this issue. We have programs that specified for children on the move, which is basically focusing on the issues of young people, children, and their parents as well, because they are part of that community. They have parents, they have families, and it is basically that UNICEF tries to provide them with different services, including psychosocial support, skills development training, and so on and so forth, so as to integrate them within the Egyptian communities. It's basically, I think, the issue is the social cohesion between the migrants and refugees and the Egyptian community and the host communities in Egypt. And it is an issue that UNICEF, in collaboration with ILO, is currently tapping into in a very big project that's anticipated to start in 2019 to actually address the issues that you're just referring to. So we're joining forces as UN agencies to tap into the issue of young people being isolated from the Egyptian community, and more specifically from the economic empowerment, so as to be part of the employment sector. And this is part of a new project, and I can invite Amal to talk a bit about the policy levels that's anticipated to take to be part of the proposals that we're currently preparing jointly with ILO.
Well, I'm moderating the session, so I'd like to stick to the part of the moderation, and I don't want to run beyond my time. So I think we will wrap it up at this point in time so that the schedule flows very well. I'd like to thank all four panelists for a very inspirational intervention, coming and representing different sectors and different perspectives and different parts of the globe as well. I think you have covered a lot of ground in very short time, and I thank you for that.